And coming up on this week's show, our first Billwatch, we examine the Transport Select Committee's recent scrutiny of the Railways Bill ahead of its second reading this week. London to Germany by Eurostar. Excellent. Where can I book a ticket? And Richard goes behind the scenes with a potentially game-changing new signalling solution. So welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and...
from me, Richard Bowker.
So let's go. The Railways Bill is one of this government's flagship pieces of legislation and is the biggest change for the railway since privatisation more than 30 years ago now. Second reading of the bill takes place this week, but scrutiny and discussion is already well underway, certainly here, and not least by the Transport Select Committee. So in the first of our promised Billwatch segments, we focused on the committee session on November the 26th, because there were a few sticks of dynamite. Richard.
There were. It was pretty punchy in places, actually. It's just worth saying what this session was about. They're oral evidence gathering sessions, right? And the committee will talk to various witnesses with different sort of themes as they go through it. This hearing had two panel sessions, right? And the theme was access, really, particularly for non-GBR operators. So they heard from the ORR, the Office of Rail and Road, John Larkinson, Chief Executive, Stephanie Tobin, who's the Director of Strategy and Policy, was there. And then there was a second panel, which came on immediately after the first one, and that had representatives of non-GBR operators. So we had Nick Brooks, who runs an organisation called All Rail, Maggie Simpson, OBE, who's the Director General of the Rail Freight Group, and Steve Montgomery, who's the Managing Director for Rail at First Group PLC. Now, this stuff's all on the record, of course, and no one, including the ORR, although they were more kind of free about the way they said certain things, but nonetheless, no one held back from saying what they really thought.
Good. Just worth pointing out, I think this is the first one that we've watched from the Palace of Westminster, the old building, because we've normally done the TSCs from Portcullis House, haven't we? So it's different surroundings if anybody's wondering what they're seeing. Yeah. Great. Shall we start with the ORR not holding back, Richard? That's got to be a spectacle. Because it's clear that the issues you predicted would be critical when we covered the Railways Bill on episode 110 around a month ago, all, how shall I put this, burst forth.
They did, actually. I'm not sure I had any marvelous insight. They were pretty obvious, but they are more serious than perhaps we first thought.
Credit where it's due. You put your finger on them and they were all discussed.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you very much. Right. So in time-honoured fashion, we've got a series of clips now. I think we've got a half dozen or so clips. Usual health warning. We do try very hard to ensure that when we edit clips, we don't take them out of context. We think
no
that's really
Trumpian
important.
Edits.
No, quite. But there's no substitute for watching the whole thing. This one's actually a little bit of a slightly shorter one, actually. It's only about 2 hours instead of the usual 2.5. But we'll put a link on our website for the hearing from the excellent parliamentlive.tv channel, which is really good. So you can watch or listen to the whole thing. Right. Clip one. Now, this is in the context of a discussion that was taking place. This is panel one. So this is the ORR, right? And they're talking about the powers of the ORR in the new world. And here's Baggy Shankar, who's the Labour MP for Derby South.
Will the ORR have sufficient powers to enforce GBR's compliance with its licence?
I think that gets us on, I think, probably to the change in our role. So it might just, if I could just take sort of 30 seconds just to explain what big changes are to our role, because I think I will get to the exact answer to your question, but I think it is just worth pausing on that, because there are some fundamental shifts in what we do. In the sense that Stephanie's just said, one big change is the scope of what you might call our monitoring role. At the moment, a lot of our non-safety monitoring role is focused on Network Rail. In the future, it'll be focused on Great British Railways, and Great British Railways has a much bigger role than Network Rail, because it not just does the infrastructure, it does the train operations, it does fares. And we will be monitoring, Great British Railways will be monitoring their business plan, which will cover track and train for everything they do. So it's a big big expansion within our role, and indeed we may get guidance on that from the Secretary of State. So that's a big expansion of our role. But if you look on specifically going to our enforcement powers, would be on streamlined and reduced overall, I think, from what they are today. So our enforcement powers in the future will be concentrated on enforcing the licence. And the government's made it very clear that they expect the licence to be a streamlined, a narrow licence compared to what it is now. So that would effectively, for example, we would have in the licence there would be a specific condition on long-term asset sustainability. We would enforce that. But we wouldn't enforce, say, train service performance. So recently we took action a couple of years ago on poor performance on Wales and Western. We wouldn't do that in the new system. That would be for the Secretary of State.
So there you go. So the points that John Larkinson's making there are really distinguishing between monitoring and enforcement. Enforcement, obviously, being able to tell somebody what to do, usually when they don't want to do it, right? And monitoring, which is just kind of watching what they're doing and advising, of course, accordingly. And of course, that's a very important distinction. He talks about being able, they will still be enforcing the license, but he makes the point that the license is going to be more streamlined than it was before. So this is a narrowing, a constraining of the ORR's reach, if you like. And the critical thing there, Nigel, is the fact that it will be, in the new world, it will be for the Secretary of State to, in effect, be the one who is accountable for and enforcing the performance of Great British Railways. We all hope, of course, that'll be done through an empowered Great British Railways organisation, but this is a clear shift away from a regulator to the Secretary of State.
And that is a very key point, and John made it very clearly, didn't he? He was leaving nobody in any doubt that this moves on and changes.
Yeah, and he says we'll still do our job, we'll do exactly what we're told to do, but what we're going to be told to do is going to be different to what it is today. Now, interestingly, Baggy makes a supplementary point. He asks a supplementary question, which I think is really interesting. Here's what he said.
As fundamentally, though, in your view, can a regulator hold a public body to account for its performance if it's got no enforcement power?
In that sense, no, because we wouldn't be doing it, because it is, that again, it's a design of the system. Effectively, the Secretary of State now takes a sort of stronger overall sort of accountability, and this system is designed around Secretary of State. Ultimate accountability goes through her, with some areas where effectively there's a sort of what you might call a specialist enforcement role that we do, and subject to a wider range of advice, drawing on the fact that the government wants an independent regulator, they want a source of expertise. And I think that's one of the things that we do have, sort of deep expertise in some areas, and we also have the power to speak out. But it is just a different system by design, I think.
Would it be helpful if there was some sort of mechanism where you could, if the Secretary of State, for example, doesn't take the advice and doesn't listen to you, should there be a mechanism to be able to sort of challenge that, or do you think the fact that you'd put stuff in the public domain, would that be sufficient?
I mean, ultimately, we support government policy, and if this is the direction of travel in legislation, generally, I don't think it's my job to say no. The government ought to do it differently in that way. The question, so the system will be what the system will be, and
so that is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, yeah. John is very careful there. He basically says, "Look, I kind of hear you, but this is the design of the new system." He makes the point, he talks about specialist enforcement, because they do have a source of expertise at the ORR. They definitely have that. And I thought that was a fascinating sort of interplay between them when Baggy said, well, what happens if the Secretary of State doesn't take your advice? And John, quite rightly, in my view, said, well, it's not really my job to say what the government should do. This is what they want to do. The system will be what the system will be. And I think it's quite interesting that particularly some Labour MPs, it's almost like they want the cake and eat it. They want to have Great British Railways, want to take back control, whatever that means, despite the fact that the department's really been running it for 6 years. But let's just gloss over that, right? We want to take back control, and yet we don't like some of the things that come with that. Well, I'm afraid, be careful what you wish for.
I wrote in capital letters on my notes that comment that I think is just so revealing. The system will be what the system will be.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Deal with it.
Yeah. I am a public official.
Yeah.
I can only work within the parameters I'm given. And I will do, but
I now have parameters.
they're different to the ones they were before.
Yeah.
So that was fascinating. Now that kind of sets the scene. So you can see here a world where the ORR are clear that their role is changing. And there was a great bit which we don't have in the clips later on, where I think even Maggie Simpson said, well, if you want a consultant, why not just get a consultant, right? When talking about the difference between monitoring and enforcement. But there's John setting the scene. Right, now we move on to the meat of this, which is capacity allocation, which is a fancy way of saying who decides who gets on the railway.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's probably the biggest single change that's within this railways bill compared to the model we've had for, as you said.
And on an increasingly constricted railway. And it's going to be a hot issue.
Yeah, you're spot on, right? Spot on. So first question here comes from Ollie Glover, MP, who is the Liberal Democrat MP for Didcot and Wantage in Oxfordshire, but he's also the Liberal Democrats transport spokesperson, right? So, and he goes into bat on a subject that we raised as a concern in a previous show. Here's his first question.
In your view, could clause 63 in the bill, which is the capacity duty, as currently drafted, allow GBR to override its other duties, which it says are important, such as promoting the interests of rail freight?
I mean, certainly as drafted, that's what I would say it appears to do. Yes, I would say it's very much an overarching power, and it doesn't seem to be subject to its duties, other duties. So that, on the face of it, is a very, very strong power indeed. The question is, I think, what's the actual intent behind it on that.
I think you also need to read it in conjunction with clause 18.4, which gives it that sort of everything is subject to the one you've just talked about, the capacity duty. So reading them together, it would appear to be a very strong power.
Very.
So that is kind of the first wow moment, right? When he says, as drafted, can the capacity duty, which is this clause on the face of the bill, can the capacity duty, which sort of says, and by the way, GBR, you need to put your services on first, and you need to think about services which you don't run today, which you might do in the future, right? Will this capacity duty override the other duties such as promoting the interests of rail freight? And John says, yeah, as drafted, that appears to do that. It's an overarching power. And Stephanie Tobin almost kind of makes it worse. Well, not makes it worse. She just amplifies it by saying, clause 18.4 in the bill says, everything's subject to that capacity duty. This is a very wide power. Now, before we discuss that, though, because you've got to see these two things in context, Nigel, I want to play you this, right?
Okay.
Now, because where it becomes relevant is this thing called the appeals process, right? So you, Nigel Harris, you run a freight company, right? You've already got access rights and you want to carry on having those access rights, but
that's why it's called a right.
Yeah, but Great British Railways decides that in the new timetable that, they're up for renewal, right? The rights are about to come to an end. They're up for renewal. You want to carry on running the service, but GBR says no, right? For whatever reason. And so you appeal, right? You appeal to the ORR. And the question is, does that appeals process have real teeth? Now, we said on the previous show, that episode 110 you referred to, that I said I was concerned that the appeals process really comes across as not much more than a judicial review framework, which is very narrow. It's very limited. It's all about procedural fairness and lawfulness and all that, rationality and so on. It's not about overturning the decision because you didn't like it, right? That's key. So listen to what Stephanie Tobin says about the powers of the ORR and the appeals. But then Ruth Cadbury, the chair of the committee, asks a typical sort of direct and no-nonsense question. And just listen to the pause between Ruth's question and the answer from John and Stephanie. Here it goes.
Just to talk about what then the powers will be for us, we'll be assessing whether or not decisions have been lawful, whether or not they're reasonable, whether they've been procedurally fair, and whether they are rational. So we'll be very much applying judicial review principles to those decisions. And we can quash decisions, so we can make the decision void on the basis of what we find there. So it's quite a, it is effective test, but you would expect GBR to be making appropriately lawful decisions. But where that is not the case, we do have power there. And as John talked about, we can also look at the provisions in these various policies and say, well, we're not sure this is a clear provision, someone is challenging it for various reasons. And for the decisions, so again, the two areas where appeals can happen, we can remit the decision back to GBR and we can give a direction on what we think they should look at. Now, it's all, I think just saying it in the round, it's still to be developed in much more detail.
Okay, so that might be the answer to my final question in this section is, under the provisions in the bill, how likely is it, do you think, that the ORR realistically could overturn an access decision made by GBR?
I think on the basis of lawfulness and reasonableness, procedural fairness, one would expect that GBR would perform their decisions effectively in that area. But there is scope in other areas for decisions to be pointed back to them with some very direct guidance. So I think we can make it an effective process. But John's point at the start is we cannot substitute our own decision. We cannot look through the merits of the decision again, because that would put us in an incredibly powerful role, which is potentially, as John described, where we are now. That power has to shift to GBR to take decisions about the network it's running.
So there you go. I mean, Stephanie manages to do a brilliant job there when asked, what's the likelihood of you being able to overturn a GBR decision? She uses 250 words to say, not likely at all. There you go.
You're right about the silence, but I'd invite Green Signalers to replay that bit of a clip. John Larkinson, you and I John used to work for you. You've known him longer than I have. But he's a very careful, very proper man in his responses, isn't he? And what I thought was really funny there was, into that silence, the way he turned to Stephanie and just sort of, what the hell do we say to that? John's shrug and look at Stephanie absolutely said it all. It said more than the words between the pair of them.
Oh, I mean, silence sometimes speaks 1,000 words, doesn't it? So no, John, you're right. John is a really good guy. He's very, he's very straightforward. He's very precise. He's a,
proper to the nth degree.
He's a great guy, And at that point, you can tell he's not quite sure what to say, because he doesn't want to say what he probably really thinks, which is
blurt out the truth.
Yeah. So, but he kind of does anyway, right?
Well, yeah, that shrug is just priceless when he looks at her.
It is priceless.
Now,
but park that for a second, right?
Okay.
So there was other stuff that the ORR talked about with the committee, but we now move on to the second panel, which has got those three people who've clearly come from a certain perspective, right? Okay.
You're heading for Steve Montgomery's moment of brevity.
Well, Steve's he doesn't use superfluous words, does he? Right?
Taciturn Scott.
Now we're sticking with the theme of access, right?
Yep.
And network access. So Ollie Glover has another go with this group and says, bearing in mind, by the way, you probably see from the images if you watch on YouTube, the three of them, Nick, Maggie, and Steve, were sat behind John and Stephanie in the first panel, so they heard it all, right? Yeah. So there's an element of kind of theatre about this.
They know
they know what's coming, right? So Ollie asks the panel whether they think what is in the bill at the moment is fair and appropriate.
It's brilliant.
There's various things in the bill about creating a new network access regime. I'm sure many people wouldn't necessarily be overwhelmed with despair at changing the current arrangements to track access contracts, etc. But do you feel the provisions made in the bill for non-GBR operators are fair and appropriate?
No,
As it stands at the moment, no.
You might say that.
As it stands at the moment, no, we have no confidence in that. Again, because the access use policy has not been written yet, it's starting the discussions on it. But the ability to not understand that at this moment in time, how do you then get private investment into the industry when people don't know what part they may or may not play in the future? And that will stop decision making. The reason why we hope to set GBR up was to try and drive the industry forward and try and set strategies, start to set people having certainty about the future. As it stands at the moment, First Group as an open access operator has got no certainty around about that.
So there you go. So, as you said, you teed that up nicely. Suitably clear answer there from Steve Montgomery.
Brevity. No.
Right, no. Right. Now, we should just say, in the interests of fairness, that since the panel, Network Rail have published what they call a discussion document into the access use policy, right? The thing that they were talking about. So the position today, when we're recording, is different to where the panel were then. Now, we're going to have to go through that in another show and talk about it, but just be aware of that the world has moved on. There is at least a discussion document in place.
Serious part. I know we've had a bit of a giggle there at some of the sort of ironies of that, Richard. But the really serious point in my mind is the witnesses' answers, careful answers behind the carefully framed answers, really do foretell some major difficulties. If I was a singing man, which I'm not, I might be bursting into "There may be trouble ahead."
Well, yeah, no, you're right. Actually, I think there's trouble now. Right, I think it's very serious, and in fact, let's bring that to, I suppose, a beautiful head, really, because here's the final clip we're going to show. This is quite punchy. So this is Steph Aquarone. He's the Liberal Democrat for MP for North Norfolk. He always asks great questions, actually, right?
Doesn't he?
And he says, I want to ask each of the panel members, whether you think there needs to be changes to what is currently in the bill to strike a balance between a robust network, which we all want, right? There's no question about that, and the rights of non-GBR operators. Now, he did ask, he said, when he finished his question, he said, right, Nick first. Now, Nick's answer was perfectly sensible, right? But in the interest of time, I've cut straight to Maggie's answer. So apologies to Nick. It was a very good answer, but you're not going to hear it. We're going to go straight to Maggie. And apologies also for the background audio. As you said, they were in a different place and there was something obviously going on. So you'll hear that, but it will not detract from the question and this answer.
Yeah, I'm stepping back a little bit rather than backwards or up. Yeah, zooming out a little bit. And I'm conscious there are various things where we just don't know the detail, and that's affected a number of topics we've discussed this morning. But I'm interested in each of your general assessments of the bill as it is, from the point of view of how it impacts your businesses and your sectors. And I suppose building on what Rebecca asked, but more broadly, do you think changes are needed to what we now have in front of us in order to perhaps ensure the right balance between a cohesive rail network and the rights of non-GBR operators, or the free access rights of non-GBR operators? I'm interested in how you see it at the moment. What's the talk of the town inside the business in the sector that you're representing?
Yes, I mean, look, nationalising the passenger railway and creating GBR is long-established policy, and it's not my place to comment on that. But if I go out and talk to my members, and these are global investors, so people investing in ports, in quarries around the world, they want to use more rail freight because it's good for the environment, it's good for their business. They want to be in the UK, they want to be investing, but they're looking at this and going, can you tell me that in 10 years' time I'll be able to run the trains I want to run from my port or my quarry? And I'll go, well, that will depend on the play out of Clause 61, 63, the very weakened appeals role for the regulator, whether Clause 71's got any teeth, Clause 72, which gives the Secretary of State power by regulation to tell you what you can do in your own terminals. And they kind of go, you know what? Dubai's looking great, right? Yeah. Less hassle, more sun. See ya.
So succinctly put there, Nigel, in only the way Maggie can, really.
That was a classic Maggie answer, wasn't it?
Dubai's looking great. Less hassle, more sun, there is clearly in the department a dislike of open access, right? The problem is the way they've fixed it, I think, has got collateral consequences for freight, right? And that's not good. And I think it's a massive issue. And I'd go beyond that and say I think it's a massive problem. Someone has to fight this and change this. Otherwise, I think freight's got trouble ahead.
Well, we shouldn't. I mean, that was a brilliant answer from Maggie about Dubai. All that sort of thing was great. But the early part of her answer to me really made me sit up when she talked about, look, she said, I'm dealing with global conglomerates who quarries and ports and all the rest of it. And they are wanting to say, can I run my train in 10 years? And that very articulate rundown of all the different things that would have to fall into place before she could say maybe. That's the cause of these problems, because if they are serious about growth in the UK economy, they are really playing with fire here, I think. You're right. It's a really, really serious problem.
Well, if you're a shipping line, and you have got a choice, you can go into, say, Thames Gateway, or you can go into one of the southern ports.
Rotterdam.
And then move it by rail, or, well, no, that's my point, really. You can either do that, or you can go to Rotterdam and then use coastal shipping and take it straight to the northeast and avoid rail. Well, in this world, what you're going to try and do, and I think the government sometimes forget that investors and real companies out there have choices.
Yes,
and they will make choices depending on the circumstances that they're presented with.
And I'm sure you'll agree with this. They not only have choices, but they make them very quickly, and capital moves fast, doesn't it, if there's a big risk to it? And the way government, that's going to have happened with trainers on before the government's got its shoes on, trying to even think about the problem. Freight could be frazzled.
Well, on the basis of what Maggie is saying in this hearing, some of those decisions may already being taken, and that is the real problem.
Yeah.
Now, I think part of the issue here, Nigel, is because there's an element of the government saying, "Look, don't worry. I know what it sort of says, but
trust me."
Don't worry. We wouldn't really do anything to hurt freight. We've got a duty. We've got an obligation. We've got a target to grow freight. The problem is that what they say and then what they actually do can be different things. And I think this slightly controlling approach is a real concern, because at the end of the day, investors want certainty. Yeah. They don't want to be at the whim of political change.
I mean, what 1 year you're told we will not raise taxes, I will not be coming back for more money, and then, so everybody sees this stuff, nobody trusts them, nobody. And that's one of the reasons why the regulatory system did have some clout within this industry, because they knew that the regulator was safeguarding the interests of freight and would take decisions which the government doesn't like.
Yeah, and I think to sort of, I suppose, to try and sum it up, really, this government and the civil servants in the Department of Transport, I think, tend to have there's almost like a culture of, in order to deliver the right outcomes with public money, we have to make the big decisions.
We've got oversight because of this public money. We have to have oversight.
And that's the issue, right? And rather than create a framework and allow rational decision makers to make them themselves within that framework. That is the problem.
Because you can do both, can't you? You could give GBR its budget and its power, and it's got a field of play to play in, and that is the oversight of public money by giving it a budget, if you like.
Yeah.
But then letting professionals take the decisions.
Yeah.
Look, do they think it's stupid or what?
No, I don't think that. I tend to be more. I think I don't think there's anybody in the Department of Transport that wants to achieve an outcome other than more freight, better performance.
But they think they've got all the answers. That's the irritating thing, isn't it?
And I think that is the problem, right? They think that unless they do it, it won't work. And
Mother knows best.
And that is the issue. That is the issue. But in this hearing, if I were a freight operator, I would be concerned, and I think we're going to see more of that as this thing develops.
And they're on the tip of the iceberg, as Maggie said. They're the front line of these vast global conglomerates with billions to invest, which are just saying, "Can I run a train in 10 years?" And if you or me were on those boards, we'd be saying the same thing, wouldn't we?
We would certainly be looking at it with a furrowed brow. Yeah.
Okay, furrowed brow. That's a good expression. All right, let's move on, because Billwatch will certainly, without question, be coming back to this. Let us know what you think. Of course, the second reading of the Railways Bill, takes place in the Commons this week, and we'll be recovering that next week. But to mark the occasion, the government has unveiled its new livery for Great British Railways. Marking the occasion, on Tuesday, December the 9th, Secretary of State for Transport Heidi Alexander opined, "The future of Britain's railways begins today. I'm immensely proud to unveil the new look for Great British Railways as we deliver landmark legislation to nationalise our trains and reform the railway so it better serves passengers. This isn't just a paint job. It represents a new railway, casting off the frustrations of the past and focused entirely on delivering a proper public service to passengers. With fares frozen, a bold new look and fundamental reforms becoming law, we are building a railway Britain can rely on and be proud of." It's just short of a bit of Elgar in the background. Maybe you could put some on, Richard, for us. I have to say, I am really sick and tired of this frustrations of the past, broken railway stuff that is just a constant mantra over everything that they do and that they say. When actually, said he going off script, most of the problems are the result of the DFT's own meddlesome making anyway. What do you think?
On the livery, it's a subjective thing, isn't it? Design is a subjective thing. What some people like, others won't, and vice versa. I personally think it's horrid. Right? I think it's too much. It's too busy. There's lots and lots of lines that are all a bit disjointed. I'm much more in the clean, simple stuff. Right? That is a personal view, so I don't like it. The bigger issue for me is what are they trying to achieve? Right? 'Cause I thought the idea was to maybe keep some of the brands and have GBR as an overarching sort of, part of the family sort of thing. Like keep Great Western. Peter Hendy is known to like the Great Western Railway brand.
And there's lavish praise on it in public and privately.
He doesn't like others, but he does like that one. So does this mean we can't have those brands anymore? Does this mean we can't differentiate between, I don't know, intercity style services and local services? What? I mean, it just seems to me like it's a classic, let's just make a big announcement. Yeah, but what about all the other stuff you need to have thought through? Yeah, we'll worry about that next week. It feels to me like it's one of them. I'm told, or what certainly the Guardian reported it as having been designed in-house. Well, that kind of at the DFT, that sort of says it all to me, really. Why not actually get a designer? But there you go.
Yeah, exactly. It's been done in-house at the DFT. It's a bit right up there with "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," isn't it? Totally depressing. Look, I'm with you, Richard. I don't want us to be thought of as a pair of curmudgeons, but I think it's a predictable and not very good mashup of the Union flag. But they say it'll be rolled out gradually. So does that mean we'll lose all those brands? Like you, with liveries, less is more. I shall never forget the massive, classy impact of the original GNER livery in 1997, that deep blue with a bold red stripe before they were made to do all the doors red. Simple, classy, effective. Yeah. And, in design terms, made use of the length of the train. It wasn't chopping it up into sections like this does. I'll leave you with this thought. Bold liveries like that tend to work when it's a one-off or a special livery for something. Yeah. Can you imagine the assault on your eyes of a lot of trains in that livery all together in a terminus or Clapham Junction or somewhere? Yeah. One last detail, those broad white small panels around the little windows are just unsubtle and awful. They give it a real piggy-eyed look.
Yeah, no, I agree. The assault on the senses point, I think, is great. I looked at this one, thought it was a bit like a mobile migraine. It's just going to be too much. But look, great, nothing wrong with liveries, but can we have all the other stuff fixed as well?
Well,
Maybe
that's
first
right.
would be better.
Sorry, Heidi, we just aren't fans. And one final point, Richard, the double arrows were kept in 1993, weren't they, for as a symbol of railway stations. They made a big point of it.
Yep.
I think the key issue was they didn't want to spend lots of money on redoing hundreds of thousands of road signs. But who'd have ever thought we'd have seen the double arrows back on the side of a train?
We are now calling at a short ad break. Do not alight here.
I'm from the northwest of England, so the Southern Railway route from Basingstoke to Southampton has always been something of a mystery to me. So I was very interested to see this latest book by John Nicholas and George Reeve, entitled Main Line to the South, the Southern Railway route between Basingstoke, Winchester, Eastleigh and Southampton. This is part 3, section from St Denis through Northern to Southampton Terminus and Southampton Central. Part 3 covers the history of the line from the London and Southampton Railway and its successors, through the Southern Railway period from grouping till nationalisation, and then the period under British rail stewardship, as well as more modern developments. There are wonderfully detailed sections on Southampton docks traffic and other train services on the route as well. The attention to detail is superb. There are signal box diagrams, track plans, period ordnance survey maps, lists upon lists of workings, rolling stock allocations and timetables from different periods in history. Then there are the superb photographs, and there is something here for everyone. My particular interest is the period post-electrification, but every period in interest is catered for. Part 3 is priced at £34.95. But right now, Strathwood have a 3 for 2 offer on all their books and DVDs. So you could get all 3 volumes of the Southern Railway series, or have Part 3 and use the offer to get 2 other books and or DVDs. We'll put a link in our description to the Strathwood website. Happy browsing.
Right. Another big story this week was the announcement that an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, has been signed between Eurostar and Deutsche Bahn. That means London to Germany direct services are one step closer to reality. Mainstream and social media got very lathered up at the thought, with the usual sense that you could start getting ready to book tickets. Richard, are you excited at the thought of booking a direct train from St Pancras to Germany?
Well, at the moment, no.
I'm tempted to say, is that the Christmas Grinch again? But I agree with you. It's not going to happen, is it?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, right? So there's a very, very good report that's just been published by our good friend John Worth, right? Which looks at, it's called Cross-Channel Rail, and he's looked at every train type and every possible station for every kind of potential new route. Okay, worth a read. With Germany, he makes the point that Dusseldorf and Köln, Hauptbahnhof, which is the main station in Köln, you've got to rule them out. Certainly in the short to medium term, right? And Köln Hauptbahnhof is one of the busiest stations, most congested stations in the whole of Germany. He does consider that a model that uses a 2 by 200 meter formation train could serve Frankfurt and Köln, but with the latter, it would have to be the Köln-Bahn Flughafen, so the airport station. And he also points out that Eurostar, at the moment, haven't got any 200 meter trains. They're all 400 meters, but they are going to get some new 200 meter trains. They're the 202 meter long Avelius Horizons, the double-decker ones. But they've got issues in terms of Channel Tunnel evacuation because of the door location, which have yet to be resolved. So, I tend to agree with him on all of that, really. To run services to Germany, if you want to run them to Köln, it's hugely complex and highly suboptimal. And it's going to take an awful long time. So, yeah, I just think it's a great piece of fluff, but there's so much detail to be worked through. We will get John on the show, actually, to talk about that report. It's well worth a listen.
That's always a delight having John on there. Actually, Richard, he was a perfectly accurate piece of reporting, wasn't it? It's one step closer. Well, I'm reminded of Chairman Mao's famous quote about even the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Oh, there you go.
And that's what we've seen.
I think so, yeah.
And now for something completely different, as they used to say, Monty Python and Blue Peter. Signalling schemes are notoriously complex, expensive and time-consuming, so any attempt to successfully reduce the cost of design and implementation is to be seriously welcomed. But they're also safety critical, so great care must be taken at the same time. Well, there's a new kid on the block called Universal Signalling, who believe they have a potential solution that could tick all the boxes. They're starting small with a system called Ucross, but even that has a potential to be genuinely game-changing. On a very wet night recently, Richard went to the Heart of Wales line to have a look, and here's a taster of a full video we'll be uploading on Friday the 12th of December at noon. Well worth a look.
Time now to go and see the kit in action. We arrive at Llandovery, and after a full safety briefing from the COS, who explains this section of line has a full block, there will be no trains at all during our site visit, we walk onto the track to prepare the kit for the night's work.
We're here at Llandovery now. We're at the first of the work sites. We've just gone beyond the end of the station to where the points are. The guys are just setting up the survey staff that they're going to be using to do the beacon installation. Fortunately, the rain's just eased off a bit, so it's not quite as wet as it was before.
The clever electronics on the survey pole that is going to be used to log the precise GPS location of each beacon during the beacon installation survey is protected by an adapted bird bath. £10 from Amazon. Excellent.
Bird feeding bowl. Waterproof umbrella, full thing.
Sam Bement, Chief Innovation Officer, explains the purpose of the survey pole.
So this is our beacon survey staff. At the top of it is a GPS RTK receiver. It's a technology commonly used in site surveying. So it's currently booting up, it's finding all of its satellites. You can see how many satellites it's got and its current accuracy, so that's to 188 millimetres in X, Y and Z. By the time we start moving down the track, it will have dialed itself into about 10 or 20 millimetres in X, Y and Z. So every beacon we put down the track centre line, we know exactly where it is to within 10 or 20 millimetres, and that's how we create our track map afterwards.
To be able to carry out the beacon installation and log the GPS location efficiently, a rail-borne trolley is used on which the survey pole will be attached. Sam explains the process of installation.
Okay, so the team are now spreading out. We've got quite well practiced at how to do this. So right up front, gentleman right up front has a drill. He's also got a drill template, which makes sure we drill the holes in exactly the right place for each beacon. And off he goes drilling in. So it actually doesn't matter where he drills that hole. We're aiming for about every 30th sweeper. But if he gets to the 30th sweeper and it's rotten and we think it might be replaced soon, or there's, say, a TPWS unit there, or AWS magnet, we can move them forwards and backwards a little bit, doesn't matter. So he's made the holes and marked that sweeper, or bearer rather. Off he goes. The beacons are fixed using kind of railway standard hammer-in fixings. So these fixings can be removed with a screwdriver, should we ever want to take a beacon out, but to make it quick to fit, whack them in.
And that's it?
That's it, yep. We've used those fixings for years for things like track circuit tails. They're widely used in the industry, so that's what we went for. And now the trolley, this is the clever secret sauce. The trolley parks over the top. On the bottom of the staff is a beacon reader. Oh, he's already done it. We'll have to talk you through it on the next one. Off we go. Okay, so we're 30 sweepers down the line. We're at our second beacon of the evening. The trolley's going to park the staff over the top. On the bottom there is a beacon reader. The beacon's got a unique code. So our computer now knows the unique code of that beacon. The GPS I described earlier knows where we are, and there's a little bit of processing in here to get the right readings from the GPS over a period of time. My colleague here, Stephen, is going to push the button. And that beacon is now in a log in here, captured with all of its data, ready for transfer into our safety critical database.
And now it's time to thank everyone who supports us. Thanks to our programme supporter, RIA, the Railway Industry Association, and our media supporter, Rail Business Daily. Then a big thank you to everyone who's left us super thanks on YouTube this week, and you all are. Transport for Wirral, Graham Whitley, John Kirkman, Chris Exley, Alan Kirkman, Andrew Seddon, Nigel Mapston, Bob Walsh, Alistair Rutledge, Rob Jones, the Independent Brigline Rail Group, Caroline Cleveley, and Mike Heinson Evans. Thanks to all of you. It really does help. We are very, very grateful.
We are indeed. And thank you also to our new gold and silver members, who are John Pickup, David Horn. Thanks also to John Coates and David Leng, who upgraded to silver, and Phil Craig, who upgraded to gold this week. Thank you, all of you. Much appreciated. We publish a list of all our amazing members in the end credits of the show, to whom we are very grateful indeed. You can find out more about Green Signal's membership and how you can support us by clicking join if you're watching on YouTube, or following the Patreon link in the description, wherever you're watching or listening. But thank you for your support.
Indeed. And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. The biggest timetable change for a, capital letters, very long time is taking place on Sunday, December 14th, and perhaps no more so than on the East Coast Main Line. LNER alone will introduce nearly, wait for it, 10,000 new services a year and more than 60,000 extra seats across the route each week. I'm trying to get my head around that. Teams in the control room at York's Rock, the rail operating centre, have been prepping for this major change for several years, I bet. The centre is the largest of its kind in the country, alongside York Station there, Southern End, and keeps services moving along the East Coast. The Rock is like air traffic control for the rail industry, says Clive Casling, a senior member of the LNER service delivery team. He's shared more than 40 years of experience working alongside specialist timetable planners ahead of the major changes. He says, we've got a floor of signallers. Our team manages the train services, and we've got a floor of operational staff who are reacting to any situations that may arise that could have an impact on trains. I'll be busy, I think. Big changes, so good luck LNER, Network Rail, and all the other operators involved in this massive change. We're all watching and wishing you well.
Oh, absolutely. Wishing you all the best. And actually, on this story, Nigel, thanks to Jeremy Hartill of the Railway Performance Society for sending us this information. This is incredible, right?
Really cool, isn't it?
Yeah. So according to the RPS, the Railway Performance Society, the December 2025 timetable has the largest number ever of trains scheduled to average 100 miles per hour or more between two stations. It's a staggering 582 journeys per day, totaling 41,732 miles. Over double the number of journeys and almost twice the mileage of the first survey they completed in 2011.
Wow.
They say LNER have 9 services that average 111.2 miles per hour from Stevenage to Grantham using their Resuma trains. That's a significant improvement on the previous timetable. They're adding 3,091 miles of 100-mile-an-hour running a day. Now, there's not been quite the same major change on the West Coast, but even there's a similar improvement, another 3,014 miles per day of 100-mile-an-hour trains.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but this is the bit that really got me. Other highlights include Lumo's 2030 London to Newcastle, the longest 100-mile-an-hour run, which covers the 268 miles at an average of 102 miles an hour. It's amazing, isn't it? And Grand Central, I mean, it would have to be open access, but, you know, life's a whatnot. Anyway, their 1211 York to Peterborough averages 106.8 miles an hour, making it the fastest diesel train in the list. And according to the Railway Performance Society, probably the fastest diesel train in the world. It's amazing.
Which was a claim once for the HS2, wasn't it? So second time.
Mm.
Thanks to Peter Muggeridge, Harry Kernahan, David Redgewell, John Lancaster and Norman Dawes for this rather bizarre story. Trains were delayed in Lancaster recently thanks to a fake AI-generated image of a seriously damaged bridge that was posted on social media. There had been a tremor felt across Lancashire and Southern Lake District on Wednesday, December the 4th, which gave it credibility, I suppose, which, according to the British Geological Survey, was a 3.3 magnitude event. Network Rail, said it was made aware of the image, which appeared to show major damage to Carlisle Bridge over the River Lune in Lancaster at 0030 GMT and stopped rail services across the bridge while safety inspections were carried out before the line was able to reopen fully at 0200. 32 services were delayed because of the hoax. Can you imagine the engineers pitching up saying, hey?
I know. I mean, what goes through the mind of somebody who thinks it's funny to do something like that? I mean,
they just haven't enough to do, have they?
No. Right. Now, a number of people have pointed out that the acquisition powers for HS2 Phase 2A, Handsacre to Crewe, expire in February next year, February 26. Now, it is worth pointing out that the government can trigger the process for extension at any point up prior to the point of expiry, right? And that process may then take some time to complete after the expiry. But so far, silence, right? Now, my understanding is that nothing has been sold on Phase 2A that would be needed for the railway. But, only the daftest person would think the West Coast Main Line has all the capacity we will need for the next 30 years and beyond. So a decision on Phase 2A powers sooner rather than later would be rather welcome. I'm sure somebody in the government's thinking about it as we speak.
Only the daftest person would think, eh? We could think of a few who do.
We probably could add to that list, yeah. Okay.
Your favourite topic, Richard, and thanks to Steve Moorcroft for this one, the Wrexham, Shropshire and Midlands Railway have made a new open access application to ORR for direct services from Wrexham and London Euston, with intermediate stops at Shrewsbury, Wellington, Telford, Wolverhampton and Nuneaton. The company's previous application was rejected in July 2025, along with Lumo's application for services to Manchester and Rochdale from December 2028, which has also been resurrected. 3 return trains would run on weekdays and 4 on Sundays. Lumo has also applied to ORR to operate a new route between Cardiff and York, with 6 return weekday services. According to First Group, quote, supported by extensive modelling, the company has identified sufficient space on the network to accommodate the proposed services. They'll also make use of the government's recent investment in power supply for the West Coast Main Line. Sound good to you, Richard?
Yeah, marvellous. Absolutely marvellous. I mean, honestly, they've found space. They've identified space. Well, is it in the fire break paths that are now being used in order to manage perturbation, as we discussed when we talked about the 7 o'clock Manchester London? I don't know. I can't understand. I can't believe that anything has fundamentally changed, but we'll see. We'll see.
And on that happy note, that's the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send any snippets of news, big, small, local, national, please send them to us. And if we use yours, we'll give you a name check.
Absolutely, which means it's now time to do the quiz. Now, last week's question was this. What do High Marnham, Ed Walton and Monk Breton have in common? And the answer, of course, was they are all the terminating points on railway lines that are or have been used as railway test tracks. The test track was the key thing. And the winner, randomly chosen from all the correct answers we had, was Alan Pitt. So well done, Alan. If you send us an email to quiz@greensignals.org, we'll get your mug out to you. Right, this week's question, I've written it. That's a member's mug, but never mind. Honestly, Nigel's just shown the wrong mug to the camera, but it's still a really cool mug, right? Oh, he's not looking happy now, right? I do like playing the piano, right? And I thought I'd have a piano-related question this week. And this actually comes from a listener, Paul Godwin. So thank you for this, Paul. It's a great one. Where or how is a piano a key part of railway safety infrastructure?
Key part. Good game.
Key part. Do you like that? That was good, that one. All right. So where or how is a piano a key part of the railway safety infrastructure? If you think you know, answers to quiz@greensignals.org by, when would it be? Saturday, 13th of December. We'll put all the correct answers into the hat and draw one out at random, and the winner will get a Green Signals quiz winner's mug.
But not the one I showed you.
Not the one
if you're watching on YouTube. I haven't got one of the others, so never mind. Here's a great story to end on, Richard. A promising initial trial to deliver medical packages on passenger trains is planned to be extended and expanded. During the trial phase, Parcels as passengers move packages that contain pathology and DNA samples between Middlesbrough and Manchester, Victoria, and Leeds to Manchester, Victoria. TransPennine Express is now working through regulatory and safety processes, including applying for licensing, with further support and endorsement from trade unions that will enable the trial to be expanded into a more ambitious second phase in 2026, with more consignments delivered over a longer period, utilising different fleets, different types of conveyance and more routes. Good effort, I think. The second trial phase will include using the pioneering new storage method, unlocking the delivery of parcels on TransPennine Express Class 397 trains, which operate long-distance routes between Manchester Airport to Glasgow and Edinburgh. Good effort.
Yeah, really good. That nice, innovative plan. Love it.
Yeah, and sadly, that is all we got time for this week in a very packed show. Thanks so much for Thanks so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Just press the button, costs you nothing. But if you really want to support us, find out about membership on YouTube or Patreon. But most importantly, please join us again next week for this show, which will always be free. So until then, it's goodbye from me, and
it's goodbye from me.
Have yourselves a great week.